My favorite definition of hospitality is making somebody feel at home when you wish they were. And we've all had company like that, right? that old saying, fish and company smells after 3 days, right? Max Lucado tells the story of Chippy the parakeet, and Chippy the parakeet appeared in a Dallas newspaper one morning because the story was quite interesting. A woman was distracted by her telephone, and she was having a conversation while she was simultaneously using the vacuum attachments to vacuum out the bird cage, and Chippy got sucked in. So she said, "Oh, excuse me, I have to go." She hung up. She hauled a little disgruntled Chippy, the parakeet, out of the vacuum bag. And then she gave him a bath because he was all dusty. And then she blasted him with the hairdryer. And I guess this story got such big attention that a local newspaperman came and interviewed her about him and said, "Chippy really survived this?" And she said, "Yeah, but you know, Chippy doesn't sing much anymore." And it occurs to me that we live in a world where we are a lot like Chippy. We don't sing a lot anymore. If you watch the news, yuck, you just don't feel like singing. And studies are being shown that because of this fabulous little computer that hangs around in our back pockets somewhere, they said that it's going to be about another 10 years before they can decide the toll that's taking on our physical and mental health. There's no place to take a break. You used to go home from work and you were done, but now you get an email real quick with just a super quick question that your boss wants to ask you. Or you have children like mine who can always tell when you're going to use the facilities. And then "Mom, why didn't you answer your phone?" My oldest daughter, although she's married and has 2.5 children, our third grandson is due May 28th, she will call everyone else in the family, "Tell Mom to check her phone." It's hard to have a place of respite and so on and so forth. And most appropriately, I learned about being welcoming at my house. And my mom was a champion example of that. And I hope I can share a little bit about making wherever you are a little bit of a welcome place. First of all, spaces that say "sit a while." One of my very favorite television shows is one that was on well before I made my entrance into the world, Andy Griffith. And I love it. And every spring when we do the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we do a television show comparison amongst my students. And when I first put that one in, I show one of that and one of the Dick Van Dyke Show and one of the Brady Bunch. And my students will see me getting it out. "Oh, Mrs. D, what is that? It's a black and white picture." That one, I'm like, "Stop and trust me and hush. Besides, I control your grade." I remind them, this is not a democracy. This is a benign dictatorship. And so when I give them this, I put in the episode I put in is the curious thing about women. And it's when Laura is so engaged in Rob's life that she opens his mail and then she just tells him the contents, and she gets trapped by this boat that she opens, and it gets bigger and bigger. And all of my students, by the end of that time, are laughing, some of them so hard that they are wiping away tears. And here's what I see written in their last column, which asks me to compare culture and shows then to culture and shows now. Really insightful things. "Gosh, I wish we still ate dinner together the way they did back then. Gosh, I'd almost give up my cell phone just to have somebody sit on a porch and talk to me. Wow, I just wish that our houses still look like that. Seems like sometimes we don't even have decorations because we're so busy coming and going." And I understand that. So I want to reintroduce us to some other things. When you first come up to your house, what is it that you look at? What is it that you see? A few weeks ago, our neighbor and precious friends at the house in which we currently reside was getting rid of a toilet. There was nothing wrong with the toilet, but her in-laws had been to visit, and she said, "Yeah, that thing you say about making people that you wish were at home feel like they are when they're at yours." She goes, "Yeah, the reason we have a new toilet is my father-in-law decided we needed a different one, and he went out and got it before the rest of us were asked." So it was sitting there, and it had a sign on it that said "free." So I came home, and I looked at this toilet in their yard. I looked around our neighborhood, which normally looks very respectable, and my ornery side overtook me, and I couldn't help it. I ran in the garage, and I got this garland, and I walked across the street, and it was all beautiful spring flowers, and I wrapped it around the handle and very carefully tucked it in the seat, and went back to my house. And then a few hours later, their daughter came over and said, "Did you do this?" And I said, "Do what?" She said, "There's flowers on our free toilet." And I said, "Oh gosh, that's astounding." I was trying to blame it on our other neighbor that really likes things. Cheryl came over and said, "I knew it was you." She said, "You just couldn't stand it, could you? You just had to class the thing up a little bit, even though it's going to be gone." And she said, "Do you want the garland back when someone comes to get it?" Nope, nope, nope. Michael's happens to have a 70% off sale this week, and I can get a new garland. But it's important, that first view when you come up. And I've noticed myself mellowing, because when I grew up as a preacher's daughter in St. Louis, my mom would sometimes be having these beautiful cakes that were iced, or this gorgeous looking presented roast with carrots and potatoes and onions. And I thought, until I was married and had a home of my own, that they magically came out of the oven on Sunday morning. No, you have to get up and do that. And she was always saying, "Oh, don't touch that. That's for company. Oh, that's for company." And now she's mellowed. And now that I am a Nana, mellow doesn't begin to describe it. When my 2-year-old grandson comes up to me and says, "Nana, can you make me some puppy chow?" is how he calls our favorite peanut butter and chocolate snack. The answer is, "You bet." And his mom will say, "Well, he hasn't had dinner." And I'll say, "Eden, puppy chow is actually very nutritious. You have the whole grain in the cereal. You have the protein in the peanut butter. You have the dairy in the butter and chocolate. And besides, the older we get, chocolate has a lot of preservatives in it." So I'm thinking facelift chocolate, clearly one's the winner. So think about that. Everything from your wreaths to your mailboxes to your driveway, things that are conversation pieces. There are rocking chairs on our porch. And even though when we got our first, our wonderful farmhouse, 98-year-old farmhouse, all finished, and it took 10 months, and then we lost it in the May 2003 tornado, and so my little barrel that I had stenciled with checkerboards, we don't have that any longer, but we have other things that just say, "Sit here." My students will say, "Ms. D, when we graduate, could we come over for puppy chow on the porch?" You betcha. Right now, though, no. You only get to know about as much of my life as I want to tell you. And some of you, I'm just, they don't pay me enough for that. But they know I love them. And if you use your 5 senses, then the second thing that you would do is the taste of welcome. And I love baking. I don't so much love cooking, and that is different. Probably my least favorite question is, "What's for dinner?" I just fed you guys last night. And they ask again. Just like, it's craziness. But I have learned to do something, and shortly on my Facebook author page, you'll be able to download, or whatever it is you do these days, tweet, whatever, gram it, some different kinds of menus and recipes. But food is a central part of hospitality. When you walk in and you smell fresh bread baking, or the fact that my 4 blessings can recognize the bowl that is designated as the puppy chow bowl, that speaks volumes about our house. It smells that. I have different tarts and different candles that burn in different scents for different seasons, and it says, I hope, "Welcome home." Another sense, of course, would be music. They were all groaning because on Easter Sunday I was putting in some, to them, retro Easter music. And they're like, "Mom, where did you get this?" And I said, "Just so you guys know, in the days of the Gaithers and Sandy Patty, the world was a righter place." And they rolled their eyes a little bit, but I guess why I love that music is I can hear a song and instantly be transported back into that era. My students at school groan because once we get past when they were just playing Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven, I have different stations set up, and whatever era that we're studying, that's the era of music that we're listening to. And they start perking up around the 40s when we listen to big band music. And they go, "We love this. What's that called?" "In the Mood." "You want to add it to your Spotify playlist?" "Yeah, I really might." "Thank you." You can, they can be taught, and I love that too. There are certain songs from the 70s that I can remember driving around with my parents, and I hear Captain and Tennille or the Carpenters. Some of you look too young to even know what those are. Are those people you hire for your plumbing and your framing? No, not quite. See me afterwards. And you just hear that, and all of a sudden I'm 7, I'm 8, I'm 10, and I'm riding in the car with my mom and dad doing errands and listening to things that I didn't know were precious at the time. I love that. I teach young married couples, when my husband and I travel and do marriage retreats, that the first 7 seconds that you come home sets the entire tone for the rest of your evening. I think it's true for anyone, not just your spouses, not just your beloveds, but for your blessings, big and small, that come in. And if you can have some music playing. We also have added something to bring us into this marvelous century. It's a darling little crate that's painted, and it sits in my front entryway, and it says, "Your presence is your present. Please crate your cell phone." And they go away at dinner and on family nights, because nobody is that important. And everyone can wait for a little bit. I've raised my girls to the point that they do have certain albums from the past that they recall with certain things. My second born, who's a college student, as well as my third born, who's here with me today doing all my sound and saying, "Mom, that looks ridiculous," and "Your collar has issues," and other assorted helpful things. They love, when they are home in the fall, to listen to the Father of the Bride Part 2 soundtrack. For some reason, it reminds them of fall. And they'll ask, "Mom, can you have that playing? And we can eat chili and apple crisp and have the first fire in the fireplace." And yeah, they don't even like chili, 2 of them, but they still want to do that. Sure, we can do that. I grew up with my dad saying, "It's time for Sunday morning music." And every Sunday morning of my life, the Bill Gaither Trio, or Sandy Patty, or Amy Grant would be playing, and it's the soundtrack of my life growing up, followed by my daddy being the preacher saying, "The bus leaves in 5 minutes. The bus leaves in 3 minutes. Oh, for the love. Dad, do we have to? We're not ready." My sister and I would go out, this is the 80s, mind you, with big hair. We have little plastic sacks or paper sacks, throwing our electric curlers out in the back because we were never ready on time. Never, never. But I love that, and I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Hearing is also important. The senses are different. Different things for winter, different things for spring and summer and fall. And I have all kinds of ideas, but one of the things that we do at our house that's just a silly, small thing is, for whatever reason, I probably honestly did it because I was too tired to do anything else, but on the first day of spring, I go to Panera and get one of those Danish pastry rings, and we have that. I don't even cook it. I just put it on a doily, and they're happy about that. We started, for whatever reason, at the tradition of, on Valentine's Day, we do a candlelight breakfast for our 4 blessings. I don't know why. I know why candlelight, because I hate mornings. Someone gave me a t-shirt recently, and they said, "You really need to wear this one." It said, "The early bird can have the worm, because worms are gross and mornings are stupid." And I thought, preach. There it is in one sentence. I mean, I'm just like, y'all know that 6 o'clock comes around another time, and that one's better. I mean, my apologies to you morning people. My mom is one of those. "What do you want to do today?" "Nothing. I just want to sleep." But eventually we got over it. We learned that we could, especially when the girls were little, we could frolic. And frolicking started when we were potty training. Alexa went to the big girl potty, the big girl potty, the big girl potty. Alexa went to the big girl potty. We're so proud of her. Hey! And we would do that. We'd frolic when we saw really cool things like hay bales. And I have introduced frolicking to my students, and a few years ago, a girl who may be literally the largest and larger than life student that I've ever had was not really going to pass, and she was graduating at semester, and she had a 57%. She came in to take the final, and she said, "Ms. D, if I don't get this, I'm not gonna walk in May." And I said, "Well, we're gonna do this." And we started in with her final, and it got her to a 59%. One of my other students in there said, "Ms. D, you could just give her the 60%. And I said, "Oh, blasphemy. No, she needs to feel proud that she's done this herself." So we looked at things, and I'd stand over her shoulder, and she'd try to tell me something, and I'd be like, "Oh, I don't really like that answer." She would read again, and she'd go, "Do you like this one?" I'd love that one. Love that one. We got her to a 59.6. And I looked in the grade book and I said, "Go get this assignment for me. It was your lowest one, and we're going to go over that, and you're going to explain to me what you've learned, and we're going to make up a third of those points, and it's going to get you to passing." She said, "You think so?" And I said, "I know so. You know this. You're just not a good test taker." So she brought it in, and I said, "Tell me about this. Tell me about this." And she knew, and her face started lighting up, and I said, "That, sweet girl, is what I want you to know. The kind of things you're going to remember that you don't have to ask Siri about, that you're going to remember for a long time." And when she said, "Put it in Power School," we walked over to the computer, and we put it in, and it said, 60.00. And I said, darling girl, we're going to frolic. And she said, what's that? I said, come over here. All my other students got very quiet, and I held her little hands and I said her name. You are passing history, passing history, passing history. You are passing history. We're so proud of you. Hey! And all the girls clapped, and she said, I don't think I've ever frolicked before. And I said, remember that. Someday you're going to have kids and you're going to need this. Trust me. Frolicking. For many years, we've had a Christmas open house if for no other reason than life is busy. We haven't had one for the last several years because life's been that busy. And I told my husband a few weeks ago, we're going to gear up for Christmas open house again the week after Thanksgiving. And he was like, really? My husband's a police chief. He's an introvert, and he doesn't trust people because of all the years on his job. And his reaction is pretty much great. Stab me in the foot with 3 forks. But he'll do it for me. And what I want to say is just so you know, I'm thinking about you a lot more than we have time to show. And our home is open, and I want you to feel welcome. Touch and texture, rugs, flannel sheets with satin pillowcases, cozy throws, ottomans. I love this. In my marriage workshop, I sometimes tell them, though, beware of getting actual, real satin sheets. I'm just going to say they don't always stay on the bed, and you might find yourself on the floor for reasons that have nothing to do with romance in the middle of the night. That's free. I think that sometimes we don't welcome people to our homes because we're afraid they might judge us. I'm a recovering type A. Being a Nana has helped. Hitting the half-century mark +2 has helped. We once just named a dust bunny under the couch in our family room. It was Sebastian. He had some popcorn from family night in his own quarter. Even the girls weren't born with their own savings account, so Sebastian's my hero. We left him there for a while just because. In fact, when I spoke in Alaska, they greeted me the first night of the retreat that I was there with this very interesting looking critter, and I didn't know what to say. Sometimes I'll go speaking and there'll be a basket of goodies in my hotel room, and this was, the closer I looked at it, a very ugly looking bunny. And they started laughing and they said, we read one of your posts and this is a dust bunny from our collected dust in the ladies' ministry. I had to take a picture of it with me in the plane on the way home. I was trying to keep, the really obnoxious people with horrible breath that want to sit next to you. No, this is a seat for Sebastian part 2. But, he died on the way home, but we had a good time for a little bit. Just don't drop perfection. Those pictures that you see on Pinterest fail, I promise you, I am every one of those. I've accepted the fact that I'm just a crafty wannabe, and that's fine. I was the only person in home economics given extra credit for not wearing my garment to class. I had one sleeve so tight that my arm was having circulation cut off. The other one had so much free fabric, we were ready for takeoff. She said, just don't ever tell anyone I taught you to sew. Imagine my husband's shock the first time that he lost a button when we were married and he was on his way to a conference and I got out my hot glue gun. He said, sweetie, you're not really going to do that. I said, that is in my sewing box and that is absolutely what I'm going to do with it. He didn't have time to argue, so I said, just don't breathe deeply. It was right here. He just took baby breaths and it stayed on until he got undressed that night. I just say, don't have excuses. If you're going to wait until life is perfect or everything is redone or your kids are potty trained or won't embarrass you, you're never going to do it. My mom still loves to tell the story of how she had some, I guess, important church people over. Are there other kinds? I don't know. But apparently they would be more likely to be offended. When my sister got into my mother's private stash of monthly party supplies and hooked them all on and came hopping into the dining room. Look, Mom! I found your Halloween stuff. Perfect. But you know what? They ended up laughing because those are things that are life, and what are you going to do? I once spoke to a group of 1,000 ladies in St. Louis, my hometown, and I don't know, but in your own hometown where occasionally there are people who told you to stop running in church in your audience, you just feel a little bit more uptight, and I had forgotten mascara. And I didn't want to wake up my husband because for some awful reason we thought it'd be fun to bring all the girls with us, and they were really little. So I had a Sharpie, though, that I used at my book table, and I just leaned up to the mirror, like so, and colored. And do you know it works? The only thing you have to explain for a little while is all the little black furry things on your thumbs. Of course, they got tickled. They're like 1,000 women, and you didn't think one of us would have had some mascara? Well, you know, live and learn. We play some conquer clutter games. The 7-second rule and the 1-year rule. The 7-second rule is simple. When you get home, it's very tempting to just start throwing things around or leave them in piles until even your piles have piles. But if you just take 7 seconds to put that item where it belongs, it's done. Teach your children this. I still use the same language, even though our blessings are no longer 1, 3, 5, and 10. Our babies are now, the youngest is 16, and the doctor said, by the way, you have borderline high cholesterol. It appears that you've chosen 5 pounds per child to keep with you as souvenirs. We need to lose some weight. My question to him, hospitably, of course, was, who's we, Kimosabi? I just want to know why the raw broccoli in the refrigerator speaks not a word to me, but I can be upstairs in my bedroom and the hidden cabinet of peanut M&Ms is going, psst, down here. Come over to the dark side, we have cookies. And I go. And the 1-year rule. Every January, we want to do spring cleaning early, and all of us will, we trade stuff in our closets, and my girls tell me never wear that again and other assorted things. But basically, the 1-year rule is if you haven't worn it, used it, or enjoyed it in a year, it goes away. Sometimes the land of away is called goodwill. Sometimes it's to someone who can use it better than you. We took a lot of things down there last year to one of the coaches at school whose wife had just had a little girl. And they were darling little playhouse type things that were in immaculate condition. And I kind of wept a little as I gave them to her and said, I hope that these enjoy their new home. Sometimes it's just in the garbage and you have to bury it in the garbage, or even the trash man won't take it. They're that bad. And the New Year number game. Make it for a whole year. Every time you get something, and with the exception of groceries, which that's usually true anyway, something else has to go out. So unless you're literally replacing something, my mom once offered me $30 if I would replace my favorite white blouse because, according to her, the gray and yellow was not attractive, nor that anyone believed me that it was part of the pattern. But it was my favorite, and she said it's no one else's favorite. The Oasis principle. Make your bed first thing every morning. When my girls were little, they did that. Now that they're in college, I've kind of been like in high school, you know what? Just keep the common areas clean, and we'll agree that some rooms in this house don't reflect the views of management. Have one clean focal point in each room. Maybe the couch and coffee table in your family room, the kitchen table in your kitchen. I always try to keep, if the rest of the house is an entire wreck, at least the family room, I could bring someone in there without too much shame. It doesn't mean that it'll be clean, girls. It just means it'll be picked up. So there you go. Tell them that they like that the dust doesn't matter so much. You want to do that. Develop a unique style. Have confidence. I have often been accused, I hope in a positive way, of not caring what people think when it comes to what I wear or how I decorate my house. I really like old things. I like retro things. And so when I saw this, when we were prom dress shopping with one of my daughters one time, I said, oh, that just screams 1948 to 1952. And they're like, I know, put it back. And I said, not a chance. It's mine. But I find it interesting. The older they get, the more they will come in my closet and borrow things from me. And they're like, Mom, when did you get cool? And I'm like, I've always been cool, girls. I just haven't cared. I liked retro before retro was a thing. I liked retro when I was actually in retro, before it was retro. Just have confidence. When people come to our home, they're usually, oh, what did you get the idea for that for? And usually it's because, that was during the 11-year period in which I stayed home with my girls and we didn't have any money. So that's why that's a spice rack. That's why that is a towel holder. That's why that is a quilt rack. We have an old ladder that has quilts from my husband's grandparents and my grandparents, and all of them are on this rack, and I love it. And he bought it for me for $7 at an antique store one year on our anniversary. And when my baby sister, who is the most amazing woman in the world, comes back from Taiwan with her family on furlough from where they're missionaries, one year she saw that up and she said, where did you get that for? And I said, Greg got it for me for only $7 at the antique store for our anniversary. And she said, I thought maybe you got it out of somebody's trash pile. When my Aunt Nito looked at our farmhouse when we finally got it finished, she came over and looked at it all, and I really wanted her approval, and she was looking around at everything, and finally she folded her arms and said, "Well, dear, it's not for everyone." And that's fine. I just know what I like. I cut out pictures for inspiration. I just cut out things that I like. And sometimes I do something with them and sometimes I don't. I just go, I like the look of that, or I like the colors in that, or the ambiance of that, and they just make my heart happy. I wish I could show you my big dream house notebook that I had before we remodeled that farmhouse, but it went away, as in it's probably in Kansas now instead of not being in Kansas anymore, right? But I loved it so much that when I first did this workshop, we had just finished our farmhouse, and I had told these two ladies from Indiana, or I told the workshop, if you are ever near our farmhouse, feel free to drop in. And my babies were all very little, and one night around 9 o'clock, there's a knock on our door. My husband opened the door and he said, babe, there's these two ladies there that say they're from out of state and that you told them at a workshop that if they were ever near our farmhouse, they could come by and see the decorations. And I said, yeah, I did say that. Bring them in. He's like, stop, security. And I'm like, seriously? They just want to see the decorations. You know, his world, my world. He reminds me that you can't just walk around leaving everything out in the open, and I remind him that not everyone he meets is a criminal, so it works well. But if you do that, then your door becomes a headboard and so on. You can use a cake stand for a lot of things. A stepladder is a side table. You can hang a clothesline for pictures and family styles. And one thing that I started doing a few summers ago was we like to be outside. And a lot of our glasses are old jars that I find places, or sometimes Walmart has a special and I get them with handles. But when you're sitting outside, flies and other bugs like to get in your lemonade and land there, and that's kind of gross. So what I figured out is you could get seasonal cupcake liners, put a little tiny cut in them, put a straw, which everyone goes, oh, straws. It's such a small thing. 98 cents for a pack of 100 at Walmart. Anyone can do this. And you just put them out there and they're like, oh, that's so clever. And you're like, this is my idea of a craft, but thank you. Just, really, really easy things. Maybe hospitality is just putting some of these in mason jars around your home. I figured out that you can buy a $4.98 bag of groceries from any flowers from any grocery store, put them in little mason jars, tie some burlap or ribbon around them, and you have neighbor gifts and colleague gifts. And we rode up here with these in the cup holders today in the rental car, and Ellie said, Mom, I would love to put your tea up there, but no, we had to have fresh flowers. And I said, but look how pretty the front seat looks. I think she rolled her eyes, but I was looking at the road. Maybe it's just that you find out when your guest is coming what is their favorite movie candy, and you put it there with a couple of movies laying around your house and a bag of microwave popcorn, and help yourself if you can't sleep. I understand jet lag. It just means the world to people. My friend Amanda, who's very crafty, made me this Christmas. I wanted to claim it, but I've got too much of a conscience. She made these darling little hand warmers that you can microwave that go in your pocket, and it just says, thank you for your warm and caring heart. It's a blessing to work with you. Merry Christmas. She got the little bags at the dollar store, sewed these little things inside them, and I have my own little handy carrier. I said, can I be tacky because it's for a workshop? How much did it cost you to make this? Less than $3. And the fact that she was able to do that for everyone in our hallway was amazing to me. Just lighting a candle makes everything prettier. I hear that everybody looks prettier in candlelight, and when they had issues in Hollywood lighting, when cameras first became a thing, they just put Vaseline on it to mimic that kind of glow. I'm looking at it that way. Now when my students graduate and they say, Ms. D, can I have a picture with you? I say, make me look thin and well-rested. Good luck with that. Hearts that say, share a while. That's your attitude. When I was a teenager, my mother once said to me, if you just didn't have such a terrible attitude, you'd be a perfect daughter. And I remember slamming my way to my room and going, if I knew what an attitude was, I would fix it. My first year of teaching, I think Mr. Fincher was around for that. I wrote up the first of what would only be 2 students in a 17-year teaching career for insubordinates or other things. And I called my parents that night, and I felt like a failure. And my mom said, "Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry. What did you write him up for?" And I said, "He just had the worst attitude." I'm pretty sure she was laughing because she was snorting so badly, I couldn't even understand her. She hung up the phone and had to call back. She said, "I'm sorry. I'm glad you finally understand what an attitude was." What words say welcome to you? Linger, tarry. I did a workshop for teachers this past January, and I was telling them about how when I grew up, it was back in the day of Sunday night church, which isn't a thing very much. And when we did have it, we had something called a linger longer. And everybody would bring in finger sandwiches or homemade ice cream, or sometimes we had a corn boil or a watermelon seed spitting contest. I was good at that. And I said, I miss those days. I miss the days when you could sit there and it seemed like life moved at black and white speed, even if you had not yet experienced it. It's a reason why when our grandchildren are home, we do things a bit differently. It's why we don't watch them all the time, because I want Nana and Bup's place to be the most fun place ever. Because when somebody says, "Can you make puppy chow?" or "Can I help you with that?" or "Can I push the buttons on the washing machine?" or "Can you play toy trucks with me?" the answer is, you bet I can. I tried very hard to do that with my own girls. And I feel like that's the one piece of parenting advice I took from someone is, unlike the seasons outside your window, this one doesn't come again. Treasure them. And I did. Sometimes to the exclusion of sitting and oohing and awing over just their tiny little starfish hands and the little tiny pieces of lint from baby socks that got in their toes when they could barely uncurl them. I think my husband thought I was taking it too far the first time I pulled Emmy's sock off and said, "This is the first time I think she's had stinky feet." He's like, "Okay, I could have lived without that one." But I do want to treasure that. And I want my girls someday, when I'm in my capital H home, to realize that their mama loved Jesus, loved their daddy, loved them, and loved life. Hopefully in that order. I don't want anyone to stand up at my funeral and say, "Well, she was really good about remembering to pick up the dry cleaning." It's not something that I want to be memorized and remembered for. We always had a guest book in our home that people signed, and I was able to salvage that. It looks pretty rough. When people came by to see our farmhouse, it was just a little book that sat on a stand, and we'd have them sign it. And so when students came over for study groups, their names would be in that. We have a celebrate plate that anything from former students who've come back to show off engagement rings to my precious daddy while he was still in this world and not his capital H home, when he finished his first third of chemo and first third of radiation, we wrote that there. It's birthdays, it's anniversaries, it's an A on a test. Hospitality impacts lives, and that's what we all want to do. We want to make a difference. Galatians 6:10 asks us to do all good, but especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Romans 12 asks us to practice it, which must mean that they also understood the pain of, "Oh, I wish you'd go back to your own tent." But my favorite is in Hebrews 13, verse 1. Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Verse 2, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. In our old farmhouse, we had a guest room. And we had an endless parade of visitors in and out of there, and probably one of my favorites was when CY and Patricia Kim stayed there. He had just been released from prison for sharing his faith. I was really worried because we had just barely finished the house, what they would think of it. My husband, trying to be practical, said, "Babe, he's just come from the inside of a communist prison. I'm pretty sure he's going to be okay with whatever you got." I said, "But you don't understand, babe. That's exactly why I want this to be the best place." And he got turned down service with mints and hot chocolate. And we made him a pie, and the little girls sat around there. And even if they don't remember that particular visit, what I wanted them to remember is that people who serve God's kingdom are our most honored guests. Oh, they need respite. They need refuge. They need a place to refresh. My friend Karen Eman says it this way: entertaining is about impressing people. Hospitality is about refreshing people. And I love that. Sometimes ordering pizza from Pizza Hut and paper plates is just the most welcome experience you could ever give anyone, because they're not out to impress and you're not out to impress. Hospitality requires practice and commitment and transparency and soul nakedness. When my girls were little, we had a couple nights at the table that were book nights, and we would all sit around and read and share. We do table talk, and we do it still occasionally whenever I feel like everyone's just been gone too much. And when we get at least 3 or 4 of us there, then out comes the table talk. And my youngest has a young gentleman friend. He takes her out places alone. I suppose that's dating. I prefer to call him her young gentleman friend. He was over the other night, and Ellie was also there and not working, and Greg was there, and I said, oh, this is awesome. We almost had a full table. There were 5 of us. So I said, excuse me, Chris, and I walked around him, and I got it, and Ellie and Alexa looked at each other and said, oh boy, here it comes. Mom's getting out the table talk box. And sure enough, we had it. And Chris said, is this something I do? Ellie and Alexa laughed, yep. And it's just things that make us think a little deeper, maybe. Beyond, how was your day? Because we all know that much past middle school, you get fine. What'd you do? Stuff. Did you have a good day? It was all right. Oh, well, please. I mean, I'll be writing an article about that for the family newsletter. We ask questions like, if you got $100 and you had to give it to someone else, who'd you give it to and why? If you could have dinner with one historical figure, who would it be with? What would you ask them? What have you read most recently, and what are you looking forward to reading? What's the most recent funny joke you've heard? They didn't like mine, but I'll tell you anyway because I think it's fabulous. A student put this on his Twitter account. I'm thinking about putting my grade up for adoption because I don't think I can raise it by myself. I loved it. Knowing the young man, I thought, you're pretty much right. You can find those things online for yourself, but I want us to see that the privilege of hospitality is indeed that. It's a privilege. I want people who come to my home to feel welcomed, to go away with something. If it's not something tangible, at least the idea they were thought of. My husband's best friend all through high school and best man at our wedding gets tickled because when I was expecting number 3, my sweet little Ellie Grace, my daddy was probably not long for this world, we knew, and we were going to induce her. Even though I'm not normally a believer in such things, we really wanted her here for my daddy to get to hold her. And they were driving through, and they stopped at our farmhouse, and I said, oh, if I had known you were coming, I would have cooked, but I'm on my way out the door to have the baby. And they thought I was joking. And I said, no, seriously, like we're on the way to have the baby. So I said, all I've got are some Snickers, but they're in a pretty basket. And they've talked and talked and talked about that I went around the room sharing my personal stash of Snickers in a pretty basket. And then they stopped back on the way back from their trip at the hospital just to see if by any chance we'd had her, and we did. And I'm so glad I did that, because they were around when 12 hours later my precious husband had to tell me that my beloved daddy had gone to be with Jesus 12 hours after Ellie was born. He still counts that as one of our table talks did one night, as what is the hardest thing you've ever had to do. What I know, though, is the way that I wanted to share Jesus with other people came from my daddy. I learned it in one way from him and in a different way from my mama, through hospitality. And when people tell me, oh my goodness, Ellie Grace looks the most like Don Sigler of any of your girls, my heart sings. More than that, though, when I look at her and say, Ellie, you look just like my daddy today, and I tear up a little bit, more than that, I want her to look like my daddy because he looked like my father. My daddy would say, people are more important than things. And Jesus lived his life that way. People are more important than things. I think it's why he had impromptu picnics with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. Emily Barnes says that hospitality is organizing your life in such a way that there's always room for one more. It means that you're going to add water to the soup, that you're going to slice the roast just a little bit thinner and make sandwiches out of it. It means that you're going to quickly send out a text in this day and age with FHB. Remember that oldie but goodie, family hold back? You say, no thank you. I didn't want 2 rolls anyway. Of course, when they were little, the girls would say, but Mom, you told us not to lie. What if I do want 2 rolls? Hush up and lie for Jesus. We'll deal with that little inconsistency later. I don't think it's harmed them too much. Whether it's students coming in my classroom, and I could tell you story after story of kids whose home, away from home, is my classroom. I painted it blue. The color of blue the sky gets just before it's going to turn rainy. And I've decorated it just like I would my home, and they'll come in and go, wow, Ms. D, your room is awesome. That's because I know of at least one young man who slept on a porch all night because his mama on his 18th birthday at the end of February said, you're out, son. I reckoned I'd do this till you were 18 years old, and you're 18 today, so don't bother coming back. Because I have little girls who don't have anyone at home explaining anything to them, so I'll come in and say, if you need me, Mrs. D's room has hugs and chocolate and pads. And while I can't tell them out loud that I'll pray with them, they make their way there and ask for it anyway. I hope that's because that's hospitality. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes the willingness to be available, not fancy. It doesn't take a lot. It just has to mean that you're authentic rather than ready for a contest of whose house is the cleanest. I lose happily. Now, if you want a dust bunny contest, you're on. I just want us to remember that everything we do, when we do it, as much as a cup of cold water in Jesus' name, has eternal impact. God bless you, and thanks for coming.